from the LATimes.com, the Los Angeles Times, entitled "Tracking Down the Truth of What Happened to the Donner Party" by Ann Yapenga. And Ann Yapenga writes, Nona McGlashan, granddaughter of C.F. McGlashan, the newspaper man, was the first to interview the Donner Party survivors. Is currently editing 450 handwritten letters from 24 Donner Party survivors, describing events at Donner Lake during that grim winter. The correspondence, discovered recently among C.F. McGlashan's legal papers, was long thought to either have been burned along with the reporter's home in Truckee or destroyed by him out of respect for the secrets of the Donner Party members. Excavation of the Breen cabin site is also shedding light on exactly what went on in the lakeside camp. In a project funded by the National Geographic, Lindstrom and researchers from the University of Nevada attempted last summer to locate the human remains that were supposedly burned and buried by a horseback party led by General Stephen Watts Kearny in June 1847. A couple years after the tragedy. Kearny reported that the campsite looked like the grisly aftermath of a massacre when he arrived. He said that he and his men tidied up the area to protect the sensibilities of future travelers. The excavators did uncover a pit in the spot Kearny specified, but they only found a small amount of charred and crushed bone. They won't know until chemical tests are complete whether the bones are human or animal, said Lindstrom. But in any case, quote, there was not enough human remains found to jibe with General Kearny's story about cleaning up the whole area. We substantiated that General Kearny did not do what he said in his journals. This discovery could give credence to the argument of some Donner Party descendants that cannibalism was not as big a part of the story as most people believe. Lindstrom said, we might find out that things weren't so sensational as early reports claimed, or things could have been even more terrible than we imagined. Mary Temson Newlin is the great-great-granddaughter of Donner Party leader George Donner, a 71-year-old retired school teacher living in Santa Barbara. Newlin has had a lifelong curiosity about her namesake, Tamsen Donner. Tamsen was the third wife of 62-year-old George Donner. Mary Newlin is descended from Donner's first wife, a well-to-do farmer from Springfield, Illinois. When she reached California, Newlin said, Tamsen wanted to open a girls' school. She came from a very fine background. She must have been very ladylike. End quote. After several snowbound months in the Sierra, Tamsen Donner had a terrible decision to make. Would she remain at camp with her dying husband, a choice that would mean death certain for herself, or leave the mountains with her children and rescuers? She opted to send her children on alone, destined to be orphans in a new land. Tamsen Donner died at Donner Lake, following the death of her husband. The lone survivor at the camp, Louis Keysburg, later confessed to cannibalizing her body. Newlin is proud to be associated with the valiant Tamsen, but she doesn't want to be linked through her ancestors to cannibalism. Newlin said, I think there were a lot of things told that maybe were not true. Maybe there was cannibalism, but I know my people did not take part. Nona McGlashan said that although Tamsen and George Donner probably did not eat human flesh, the Donner children almost certainly would have had to partake of human nourishment, whether they were told what they were eating or not, in order to survive the journey down the mountain. When the final rescue party arrived at the Donner camp in April 1847, Louis Keseberg was the only survivor. Because Tamsin Donner had appeared quite healthy to an earlier rescue team, Keseberg was accused of murdering the woman. Stories would later circulate that Keseberg bragged about eating flesh and told barroom cronies in Sacramento that human liver, and specifically Tamsin's, was the sweetest morsel he'd ever tasted. Keseberg has since become the most talked about member of the Donner Party. A favorite debate of Donner buffs is, did Louis Keseberg murder Tamsin? Pat Armitage, a ranger at Donner Memorial State Park, said, "In my personal opinion, Keseberg was guilty. Self-righteous Keseberg did Tamsin in." When McGlashan was writing his History of the Donner Party, A Tragedy of the Sierra, published in 1880, and still the definitive historical account of the incident, he was determined to use his interrogative. He was determined to use his questioning powers to drag the truth out of Keseberg, as well as being a newspaper man, butterfly collector, and astronomer. McGlashan was also a prominent defense attorney. McGlashan tracked down Keseberg, who was living then near Sacramento. 6 feet tall, with a full beard, high forehead, and direct blue eyes, Keseberg was afflicted by misery and desolation, wrote McGlashan. Keseberg was widowed, poverty-stricken, and caring as best he could for his 2 daughters. He was tormented by accusations that he was an inhuman cannibal. After witnessing Keseberg's plea of innocence, McGlashan arranged a meeting with Eliza Donner Houghton, youngest surviving child of Tamsin Donner, and the accused killer of her mother. Keseberg dropped to his knees before Eliza, who was only 4 when she was rescued. Now an adult, Eliza bid Keseberg to stand and place his hands between hers. Looking in her eyes, Keseberg swore he had not murdered her mother, although he did not deny he had eaten her remains after she died of starvation. Eliza Donner Houghton believed him. Many people today do not, and continue to regard Keseberg as evil personified. Ranger Warren Beers said that Keseberg's descendants changed the family name when they settled in the Napa area. It's a rare occasion when a Keseberg descendant visits the Donner Monument, and there is only one person, a Seal Beach woman, claiming to be related to Keseberg on file at the park. More than 100 years after her grandfather worked to clear the names of the Donner Party survivors, McGlashan, age 75, is determined to further vindicate party members through her research and writing. Even Keseberg, whom she describes as a pitiful character, was unfairly abused by public opinion, she said. Ryu, 1972, said, "They changed the name to Dahmer." Nona McGlashan said, "Papa, her grandfather, was the first one to say to the world, 'Do not judge. What would you do if you were starving?'" Ranger Pat Armitage recently led a group of 10 amateur historians on a snowshoe walk, billed as a reenactment of the Donner Party escape attempt. Swaddled in Gore-Tex, down and pile-lined boots, the snowshoers left their cars at the end of a plowed road and trudged up a snow-covered grade at the western end of Donner Lake.